Struggle with the decision to report it to police or not. Tonight we begin a two-part series on how police investigate sexual assaults. We start with a story of two women who reported being raped to Ottawa police and say they were treated like criminals. CTV's Natalie Pirosero reports.
This is a rare glimpse inside an Ottawa police interview room.
My name is Teresa Kelm. I work as a detective with the Ottawa Police. I'm assigned to the Sexual Assault and Child Abuse Unit.
This video was recorded by the Ottawa Police as part of its investigation into reports by two women that they had been sexually assaulted. This tape was obtained by the women involved through Freedom of Information.
I knew as soon as I woke up that someone had taken advantage of me, but I was in denial about it.
The women, Therese and Fawn, are sisters. They believe they were drugged while at a downtown Ottawa bar in March of 2003. They only remember parts of what happened that evening, then waking up in bed with men they didn't know. They both say they were raped.
The best way that I can describe how I was feeling that night was like I was really, really in a deep lake, and I was looking up, and I would finally reach the surface, take a breath, and then go straight back under. I remember being really confused, and I wanted to leave. I remember I wanted to go home.
The police tracked down the men involved. They admit having had sex with the sisters, but say the women weren't drugged and the sex was consensual. That's when investigators brought the women back in, and Therese says they felt treated as criminals.
I think you do remember having had sex with these two guys, and I've been doing this job for a long time, okay? And people make mistakes all the time. I mean, why is there an eraser at the end of a pencil? There's no doubt in my mind that you remember a lot more than what you're admitting to.
No, I
okay, now listen to me, okay? I've done a very, very thorough investigation here. This is serious. This is a serious police investigation. Yeah, I know. And we can't keep tying up resources on something if it really didn't happen that way. We've all been in situations in life where you make a mistake, and then what do we start thinking?
I did not make a mistake.
Okay, well, you did make a mistake that night, and now you're regretting it, and most people would react that way too. I've put in a lot of work on this, and I'm very confident with my conclusion on this, is that these guys didn't rape you girls, and they're willing to take polygraph tests on this. And a polygraph test is very, very accurate. Since you don't remember having said no to them, you don't even remember having had sex, is what you told me last time.
That does not happen. You do not have sex and not remember anything about it.
Exactly, yeah. I don't have anything to indicate that there was a sexual assault, and this file is going to be closed.
Fawn did not want to do an interview for this story, but allowed us to use the video and her name. 3 years later, her sister Therese is still looking for closure, haunted by what happened to them and how they were subsequently treated by police.
I would definitely like to know why they had to be so abusive, and why she couldn't have just closed it in a calm way. Like, why did she have to insult my character and insult my sister's character and say things that were completely uncalled for? Like, I want to know why she had to, because that sent me into a completely different emotional spiral. Like, it wasn't, being raped was absolutely nothing compared to having the case closed abusively by the police. It was shattering.
We asked the Ottawa Police to comment about the conduct of its officer in this investigation and about its protocol for dealing with sexual assault victims. We were told police would need a week to look at their copies of the tapes. 3 weeks later, we were told they couldn't comment about the case.
I can't speak to an individual investigation.
Staff Sergeant Jill Skinner is head of the Ottawa Police Sexual Assault Unit. She says sexual assault investigations are difficult and that she stands by the overall conduct of her investigators.
I think we have to continue to ask those probing questions, and sometimes they are going to feel like they are being attacked. Unfortunately, this person, although we understand that they've been traumatized, we also want to proceed with the charge, and we can't proceed if we don't have all the information.
I think in those cases, if they believe a woman, if they hear her out, if they're compassionate, if they don't engage in intimidation, if they are aware of their power and take responsibility with it, then it won't be so traumatic for women who are reporting sexual assault.
Tomorrow we show these tapes to some experts, including support workers of victims of sexual assault. Find out what they have to say about police conduct in this and other cases.
Anger that they didn't believe those young women and that they didn't follow the protocol. You know, I have higher expectations for our local police force.
Natalie Piero-Serra, CTV News.
Next week on CTV News.
Some women who report sexual assault to the Ottawa Police are angered about how they've been treated by the authorities. Tonight, we continue our report on how these cases are investigated. We show a controversial police interview tape to experts who help victims of rape. CTV's Natalie Piero-Serra reports.
Something needs to change.
Therese and her sister Fawn reported being raped to the Ottawa Police. They say they were sexually assaulted in 2003 by men they had met in a bar. They believe drugs had been slipped into their drinks. Therese still can't make sense of what she calls abuse by an Ottawa police investigator.
You were the one, and I've got it all on tape.
They
Before we even started,
abused me. They interrogated me like I was the criminal. They went out of their way to mess with my head and mess with my emotions at the time. And I think that they need to be held accountable for that, definitely.
Therese obtained their video interviews with the police through Freedom of Information.
there's no doubt in my mind that you remember a lot more than what you're admitting to.
No, I
Okay,
do
now
not.
listen to me, okay? I've done a very, very thorough investigation here. I've spoken to a lot of people. I get lots of these files where people, they just regret their actions, and then you start thinking and saying, wait a minute, I couldn't have consented because that's not normally me.
The women allowed us to show the tapes to some experts.
No, I think you do remember having had sex with these two guys. And
Jessica Carfanini represents the Sexual Assault Support Center of Ottawa.
I think that many of the comments that were made in that tape were out of line. I know that the officer probably wouldn't see it that way.
The Sexual Assault Support Center says it has heard similar complaints about police conduct from many other women.
There are some cases where the police do a full investigation and maybe they don't find enough evidence, but that's very different from what happened here. I think in those cases, if they believe a woman, if they hear her out, if they're compassionate, if they don't engage in intimidation, if they are aware of their power and take responsibility with it, then it won't be so traumatic for women who are reporting sexual assault.
One of the best-known cases questioning police practices in sexual assault investigations went to court in Toronto in 1998. A woman identified only as Jane Doe successfully sued the Toronto police. The judge in the case said the Toronto police clung to myths and sexist stereotypes about rape.
I'm very sad to say that nothing has changed at all. In fact, the change has been a reverse one. It's worse than it's ever been. We're firmly locked into really old myths and stereotypes around the crime. The biggest one being that we believe women lie. That's probably the largest and truest and most difficult myth around rape and sexual assault. We think women lie.
It's a disturbing piece of footage to watch.
Ottawa law professor Elizabeth Sheehy worked with Jane Doe's defense team. We showed her Therese's interview with the Ottawa police.
Well, certainly the Jane Doe case demonstrated systemic problems in the Toronto police force in terms of failure to believe women, failure to properly and thoroughly investigate rape, and failure to put women's safety as a priority, you know. It would be surprising if the same problems weren't endemic in other police forces.
Statistics provided by the Ottawa police show that very few reported sexual offenses result in charges. Last year, 511 sexual offenses were reported. 118 cases were determined by police to be unfounded. 82 resulted in charges.
Sexual assault, generally speaking, is unfounded at a rate that is approximately double the rate at which other forms of assault are unfounded.
Statistics Canada estimates that just 8% of sexual assaults are ever reported to police. Compare that to 39% of physical assaults and more than half of all break-ins.
We're taking tiny steps, and we're certainly always asking the community, how can we do this better? How can we make it easier for someone to report?
Staff Sergeant Jill Skinner heads the Ottawa Police Sexual Assault Unit.
It is a difficult system. I mean, nobody's going to tell you that this is an easy system, but we have to balance the victim against the rights of the accused or the suspect.
I think that they need to do a better job. I think that they need to fully investigate cases. I think that they need to work out some of the victim-blaming myths that they may carry.
Victims of sexual assault who decide to report it to police should know their rights. For example, you can have a friend or victim service provider with you when you give your statement. And if you have a concern about the conduct of an officer in the investigation, you can file a complaint with the professional standards section.
I just hope that we can do something about this, where the police can be accountable for the fact that maybe they didn't do everything they could have done in this case.
It's a difficult job, and that's the reason that we've increased the amount of training that these investigators are getting. I mean, we are sending them on courses and on conferences and networking with other investigators, networking with the community to try and get the information that we're going to need to become better investigators. My take is that the sexual assault investigations are one of the hardest to prove. And I think the investigators in there are the best interviewers in this organization.
I'd say a lot of perpetrators know, that they're essentially going to get away with it.
I believe that they're still out there raping girls in Ottawa.
Therese would like to hear from other women who feel they were not treated appropriately by sexual assault investigators.
Eventually, I would like to get a group together, a group of women, and battle this issue as a group.
Therese has set up an email address for victims to contact her, morejanedoes@hotmail.com. She says she hopes that going public with her story will make a difference for future victims.
I'm willing to fight for this for as long as it takes.
Natalie Pirro-Serra, CTV News.
Later on CTV News.
Brace yourself. Jewelry with